Hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. I am a mom, a nurse, a book enthusiast, and a novice YouTuber who loves to talk about books. And I am so excited to tell you guys all about my favorite book today. While I've been working on diversifying my book portfolio, I still have some books that are my ride or dies that I genuinely want to share with you because they make me so happy. And this is one of those books for me. Today's video is going to be an honest review of a series that I read a couple of years ago. It was one of the first series that I read when I was getting back into reading as an adult. And I'm going to be talking about The Dance of Thieves Duology by Mary Pearson today. And honestly, this one is just fun. You know how there's a lot of reasons why people will read. Sometimes it's a bit of escapism. Sometimes you want to learn and feel something. A lot of it kind of depends on the headspace that we're in. And this one just overall is a good time. I'm not going to say it's the best book I've ever read. That's not true. But I will say that I genuinely enjoyed myself a ton when I was reading this book. This duology. This duology includes two books. It includes Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves. It's important to note that this duology is a sequel series to the original trilogy. I believe it's the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. Personally, I like this series a lot more than I like the original series. I like the Dance of Thieves duology a lot more. There's just enough in the duology that it makes it a little difficult to read without having read the original trilogy first. You can do it, but there are moments when it's referencing different kingdoms or like you hear about previous characters that otherwise you would kind of be a little bit confused. The world makes a lot more sense if you've read that original trilogy. So essentially, there's a big thing that happens in the original trilogy. You've got a big multi-kingdom war that takes place. Things are happening. The conflict is solved, and we're kind of living in this post-war world where we're starting to see some reform, and we're starting to see these changes made. And the main characters, Kazi and Jace, live within that world. They are originally from like opposite sides of this continent that they all live on, but the characters are brought together in kind of a fun turn of events. Kazi she's 17 in this story, and she's like one of the leading spy. What are they? They're kind of like spy, like the Queen's Special Forces, I want to say. The Queen of Venda is the queen that Kazi reports to. So Kazi is sent on this mission down into Jace's area, and Jace's family they're kind of like, it's not so much a kingdom, but they're the leaders of this little territory. Jace's father dies. He passes the mantle on to Jace, and he's like brand new as this leader in this territory. And it's giving very much like mafia vibes, but like the good guys, not in a bad way. It's just like their leader within this area, and they manage like the trade within this massive trading outpost. Jace is just like stepping right into this role. It's like day one when he and Kazi meet. They don't meet on the best terms. They actually get swept up and put into a very unexpected situation where they're both and I'm telling you this because this happens within the first like 5% of the book. I'm not spoiling much here. They get kidnapped by slave traders. They work together to get themselves free, but they have to go back to like society. And so they're strapped together. There's like a chain around their ankles, so they literally can't leave each other. And that is the first like adventure of the book. You kind of realize that these two are working in opposition to each other. Kazi's mission and Jace's livelihood do not mix, but he needs her to stick around for reasons that I can't tell you. She needs to stick around because she needs to snoop and kind of figure out what's going on. And so they start in this fun little cat and mouse game where they know that they like each other. And so there's those dynamics going on. They know that they like each other, but they can't act on it. But the only way that they can make it make sense that these people from a foreign land are staying as if maybe there's some romantic feelings going on. So they're like pretending, but not pretending. And then they're political agendas are different and they're kind of skirting around each other, but also not. Like it's a really fun dynamic that I think Mary Pearson actually does really well. A lot better in this duology than she did in her original trilogy. That's my take. I believe it's a YA fantasy is the genre. Personally, I think it's really well done. And I'll read pretty much anything in terms of like genre-wise. There's some genres that I find I like a little bit more than others, but like I have nothing against a good YA story. In fact, I think I'm going to make a video here coming up soon of my favorite books that I read when I was young that still stand as like phenomenal series to me now. The things that I like about the story without getting into spoiler territory or anything like that. I love the main characters and their banter. I kind of touched on this already. It's a really fun dynamic that I don't see done as well as this within this kind of a dynamic where they're working together, but they're not. They're on opposite sides. And like, because of that initial experience that they had where they were literally chained together by the ankles for it was like a week or something like that. Like there's definite chemistry that already exists that they're trying to tamp down. It just creates a really fun dynamic. It's really well done and super fun. I very much love the heist vibes that this book gives. Something about just following along people doing morally gray things for a good cause. It just is a lot of fun to me. And I mean, I wouldn't say even like morally gray, but rules are fluid to them, to all the characters. And I just love that they've embraced it and it's a lot of fun. They've got good history. You learn a lot about the characters. I especially love that you see character growth both as a unit, as in like a couple. You see these two grow together, and then you also see both of them individually grow as characters, which is super important to me. I hate when people and characters feel super one-dimensional as they are in a story. Like they just exist and nothing really changes. And that's really hard for me. I really appreciated the dimensions to the characters within this story, or at least the main characters. I'll touch on that later. I also feel like Mary Pearson does a great job of delivering plot twists. I think the saving grace of the original trilogy that she wrote in this universe was the initial plot twists within book one. I loved book one of that trilogy, and book two and book three really fell flat for me. What I loved about book one was her plot twists, and it's the same thing in these duologies. She kept some phenomenal plot twists throughout both books that I genuinely didn't see coming. And maybe that makes me gullible because I fell for a YA fantasy plot twist. I don't know. And frankly, I don't care. Like that's just, I loved it. Sue me. I think it's a lot of fun. I don't know. I think she did a really good job with it. You can tell me if you think I'm absolutely so gullible. And actually that tracks. I am super gullible. But just let me enjoy my books in peace, okay? It was a good time. The pacing overall was really well with this as well. There was one period, and I'll talk about that in the next section. But overall, like you've got political intrigue, you've got political appearances and like balls and like what are you going to wear? You've got that side of things. And then there's a decent amount of action in this story. The main characters are both phenomenal in their own right when it comes to fighting for themselves and defending themselves. But it's just a really well done story. And I love that it's only 2 books. I feel like that was the correct choice for this duology. Getting into the things that I didn't so much like about this, because no story is perfect, right? I mentioned the pacing. Overall, it's really well done. In the second book, though, there is a period of about 50 pages where our main girl, Kazi, gets absolutely wrecked page after page after page, and you just like, she can't catch a break, and I feel so bad for her. And there is a bit of time where I'm like, oh my gosh, something else, what else do we have to throw at this poor child, and that is the only point where I feel like the pacing was a little off. Everything rained down on her, and maybe that was on purpose, and that's kind of how it is. What's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? And I feel like you kind of reach that point where the camel's back breaks and just crap hits the fan. And poor Kazi is just absolutely thrown to the wolves time after time after time. And it sucks. But the pacing does write itself. I feel like it ends on a really positive note. It's a great story. Overall, there was just that little moment where I was just like, oh my word, can we just chill for a second? You know what I mean? The next thing I mentioned, I love the dimension of the main characters in this story. And I would even go so far as to say, like, I love the dimension that you see within the supporting characters in this story. However, the villain in this story, while there is a little bit of dimension, there is not much. Really, you just hate him. You feel bad for him for like half a second, but he's slimy and oily and gross and like does things. You know how like some villains still have morals? You don't see them harming children very often. Like they're focused mainly just on the main characters and harming them or whatever it may be. I feel like this guy's just like a jerk. And I feel 0% bad for him. There's not much dimension there. It's just we have our bad guy that we hate, and then we have the good guys. There's no, ooh, but I see his side. I see his point. There's not a lot of that. So I do remember that, just being like, man, this guy just sucks. Take that for what you will. I know some people that doesn't bother as much. And so just know that that's how it is. This is a YA book. And I have a feeling that the characters were written at the ages that they are simply because it's a YA book. But with the amount of expertise that these characters have, like with Kazi's role within the Queen's Guard, or I for the life of me cannot remember the official name of what Kazi is and like what she does, but within her role, like that takes literally, I think, 9 years of training to get to that point. In the story, she does start when she's literally like 9 years old or whatever. I can't remember exactly how it is, but that is wildly young to begin. And so in my head, Kazi is 25, Jace is 27 instead of 17 and 19, which feels more accurate to me. I mean, if I were to tell you one of the Queen's like top assassin guard people and the leader of this literal society, like 25 and 27 feels very much on like par for the course. And so in my head mentally, I aged them up like 7 years, which feels okay to me because I think that the only reason that they were written that young was simply because this is a YA book and it's more of like a clean fantasy romance. But that is really all I would say. Those are the things that kind of bothered me the most, but there really isn't much. I feel like this is just such a fun story. I feel like everyone would benefit from reading it. The only downside is that I feel like you would do better reading this story if you've already read the Kiss of Deception series, which is not my favorite overall. Spice level for this, I've already kind of touched on this. It's a clean YA romance, so you know what you're getting with that. I would say spice of 1. This is a spice of a 1 out of 5. Glimpses, kisses, there's a lot of emotional growth that's there, but not much more spice-wise. I would rate this series, this is a solid like 4.5 out of 5 for me. I mentioned the things that I didn't so much love. Those are very minimal. They didn't detract from the story for me all the way through. And like I think about this book not on a regular basis, but like I think about this when I think about books that I loved. This is one of the ones that comes to mind. So I loved this series. I would recommend it if you're looking for something just fun to read, looking for a little bit of a change of pace. It does have fantasy elements. They're not very strong though. It adds to the character growth and development, but not so much the other way around. Yeah, I don't know. That is The Dance of Thieves and The Vow of Thieves. That is the duology by Marion Pearson. If you have read this series, please let me know your thoughts down below. I would love to chat about it because I think it's a good one. If you haven't read this series but want to read this series, it's on Kindle Unlimited. I think it's fairly easy to access. You should go read it sometime. If you have any other book recommendations for me, please leave them in a comment down below. Any interactions that you do with this channel help so much. So liking videos, commenting, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, all those things help me a ton. And I see all the comments that you guys leave. They mean a lot to me. So please leave more. I would love to chat with you guys. Anyways, thanks so much for joining me. I will see you guys next time.